There was once a Tulsa much different than the one we know today. A place where people went downtown to shop at Vandiver's and Frug's, and went to the Orpheum Theater, and rode trolleys, and celebrated summer with a short stay. Those times are gone, but the memories are not. Rare motion pictures take us back in time to a Tulsa that only exists in memories. Tulsa Memories, a Bank Force special presentation.
Tulsa, this place we call our home, is an infant compared to many cities in the world. And because it's so young, some of Tulsa's history has been captured in moving pictures. We're going to look at some. Welcome to Tulsa Memories. I'm Clayton Vaughn.
And I'm Beth Ringel. This show is a motion picture scrapbook, a collection of rare film clips from Tulsa's good old days.
The footage you're about to see comes from the archives of the Tulsa Historical Society.
Jack Frank will take us on a compelling journey into Tulsa's past. And we start with some of the oldest motion pictures of Tulsa from the late 20s.
In simpler times, there was a summer celebration here called the Rose Carnival. Tulsa wanted to be the Rose capital of the Southwest, and every June for several years, the Rose Carnival in downtown Tulsa attracted a big crowd. The Rose Carnival was much more than a parade. Included in the pageantry was a prettiest baby contest. And area women competed for the crown of Miss Tulsa Rose. The winner got to go to a national competition in Atlantic City, which was the forerunner of the Miss America pageant. It sure took a lot of roses to cover all the floats. Tulsa school kids had to make them out of paper. Ruth Dunlap remembers the Rose Carnival. She was in Kendall Elementary at the time.
They brought those petals and leaves. They were all cut out. Now, who cut them out, I don't know. But they were uniform, so there must have been, you know, some way of cutting them. And they taught we kids how to make roses and put them on, and they took them then and put them on the floats and the cars. Oh, I imagine we probably did it more than a day. I would say it was probably a week, you know, with a bunch of kids with crepe paper. Yeah, I would say it was probably at least a week. It would almost had to have been.
Did you spend?
We did roll those little roses.
The Rose Carnival was a highlight on the social calendar in 1920s Tulsa, one of the biggest events of the year.
Oh, yeah, it was a big deal. Of course, Tulsa was so much smaller. I mean, you all can't visualize the difference, and it seemed like a big place to me, but it really wasn't. When we lived there at 11th and Lewis, that was out in the country.
Even though it was very popular, the Rose Carnival was discontinued during the Depression. Another celebration we don't have anymore is Brookside Shorts Day. The Tulsa tradition started in 1951 as a gimmick to encourage summertime shopping on South Peoria. Former Tulsa band leader Honey Hudgen remembers those carefree days on Brookside.
Well, it was just for fun, awfully hot, very little air conditioning, and one of the merchants decided that you might as well enjoy the heat of summer, so he thought about getting a child's wading pool and filling it with water, and if you didn't wear shorts on the appointed day, they dunked you. That was a part of beating the heat, to wear the shorts, and a gimmick that they would dunk men, especially, who didn't.
There was also a Shorts Day Queen contest for teenage girls. The 65 pageant was in the parking lot of the Brook Plaza Shopping Center at 51st in Peoria. As you might guess, girls were judged on how they looked in a pair of shorts. One event that has lasted through the years is the fair. Early fairs were held close to downtown, but in the 20s, the fair was permanently moved to 15th and Yale, where rancher J.E. Crosby donated some land he had there to the county. 15th and Yale was way out in the sticks then. You had to take dirt roads to get there. Tulsa County Commissioner Lewis Harris.
These grounds were purchased in 1922, early 20s, in 2 tracts, 160 acres and then 80 acres. And of course, at that time, it was out in the country, quite a ways from town. We have pictures when taken in the 20s and 30s when they were just frameworks of houses going up along 21st Street. And over toward the east, where Sears and Target are now, that was open pasture land.
Those early Tulsa fairs were pretty much centered around agriculture. Livestock contests and equipment shows were the big attractions. This footage was taken where the livestock barns are today. Whitley Cox was on the Tulsa Fair Board in the 40s.
In those days, it was more or less livestock, and they had exhibits in some of the farmers. Francis Kennedy, he'd have a display of tractors and balers, you know, and all. But then down in the Merchants Building, why, the merchants were, it was pretty lively down in there. And then the youth center, then we picked the lady that was, I forget what we call, fairest of the fair. And that was real popular.
From 1923 until 1980, Tulsa hosted a big oil trade show. The International Petroleum Exposition attracted people from all over the world to the fairgrounds. The IPE doesn't come to Tulsa anymore, but the Golden Driller stands tall on the fairgrounds to remind us of those days when we were oil capital. The Driller was constructed in 1966 for the IPE. You'll never see him like this again. The Driller is resting on his back. His skeleton was made from 2.5 miles of steel rods and mesh, and every inch of him was covered with plaster and concrete. The Driller was, and still is, the largest freestanding statue in the world.
It's been a legend out here, and as I say, people from all over the world that come here, many of them want to stand there and have their pictures taken by the old Driller. But it's a wonderful attribute to the city of Tulsa, and so are the fairgrounds.
Over the years, the Golden Driller has been attacked by souvenir seekers, pounded by ferocious storms, and once shot in the back with an arrow.
Coming up next, images from 1931 when famed pilot Amelia Earhart dropped in on Tulsa.
It's had a great fascination with airplanes and flying. This city has a rich aviation history.
Jack Frank takes us back now to where a lot of that history was made, at Tulsa Municipal Airport.
Tulsa was widely known as the oil capital, but for a time we were also the aviation capital. It's reported that in 1930, Tulsa Municipal was the busiest airport in the world. Jan Moritzen is a longtime employee of the airport.
There were a lot of airplanes. I don't remember what the count was, the daily count as far as traffic is concerned, but there was a lot of traffic in and out of here at that time.
Tulsa's municipal airport was considered one of the finest of its day. Initially financed by rich Tulsa oilmen and business leaders who realized that Tulsa could not grow without a good airport. Imogene Arnott was working and flying at the airport when it was Tulsa Municipal.
We had a fantastic amount of citizens of Tulsa who were vitally interested in its growth, and aviation at that time was important to the growth of the city.
The terminal of Tulsa Municipal Airport was on Apache east of Sheridan. It's not there anymore.
It was one of the earlier terminals, yes, and it was also a very well-built terminal, and it had a lot of art. There was a lot of Art Deco in that terminal building, which was in high style at that time.
In the old terminal, we had about 4 or 5 airlines. When I came here, we had the one rent car. They blazed the trail for rent cars in the terminals, at airports, really.
Among the celebrities who flew into Municipal Airport, Will Rogers. And aviatrix Amelia Earhart stopped there. This is Earhart in 1931. The Tulsa tour sponsored by Beechnut Chewing Gum. Earhart is demonstrating the auto gyro, a contraption that some called a flying windmill. During her 1931 trip here, Earhart visited with a longtime friend, Dorothy McBurney. That's McBurney on the left, Earhart on the right. This footage was taken at the home of Mr. and Mrs. J.A. Hall, who lived in a mansion on South Peoria, which is now the Tulsa Garden Center. In 1937, 6 years after this Tulsa visit, Amelia Earhart disappeared, attempting to fly around the world. The airport was more modern by 1965 when the rock group Herman's Hermits arrived for a concert. Remember them? They had smash hits like Mrs. Brown, You've Got a Lovely Daughter, and Henry VIII. They were British like the Beatles and had a real strong following in Tulsa, especially among teenage girls. Herman's Hermits was one of the first rock concerts in the new Assembly Center. Roy Saunders was manager of the building back then.
It was very successful. They had a good turnout. Those shows went off without a great deal of difficulty at that time, and it wasn't until later years, on into maybe the later 60s or early 70s, that some of them began to develop crowd problems.
Here's another crowd pleaser who came to Tulsa in the mid-60s. Jane Mansfield was supposed to be part of a star-studded show called the IPE Spectacular at the Assembly Center. Her dogs were part of the act.
I hold one here and the other one right here, and they just look at me. But they're the integral part, a very integral part of the sketch. I couldn't do the sketch without the dogs.
The show featuring Mansfield was a total disaster. It was canceled just before showtime when the promoter failed to pay the stars.
When I went down to the stage, I found that the promoter at that point had skipped town with the money. The entertainers were there and they refused to perform because they hadn't been paid, and then the audience got rather unruly.
Backstage, Dinah Shore, Jerry Colonna, Henny Youngman, and myself just waiting for the word to go on, and we didn't know really anything about it until right before the show.
Okay, so we didn't get to see Jane Mansfield, but the Assembly Center hosted other great events. In October 1964, Democratic vice presidential candidate Hubert Humphrey came here to grab some last-minute votes.
Yes, my friends, GOP once stood for Grand Old Party. Now GOP stands for Goldwater, our problem.
Humphrey's speech was in the Assembly Center parking lot, where the police building is today.
He is not a Republican. He is, my friends, a radical, and we don't like him.
Well, the ticket of Lyndon Johnson, Hubert Humphrey did win the election that year, but Tulsa voted for Republican Goldwater.
I want to be...
Tulsa has always loved parades, and there have been some great ones through the years. They used to march right down Main Street. One of the largest was always on Veterans Day. This shot is looking north on Main and shows what downtown looked like in '65. You can see all the old downtown stores where shopping was so much fun. On the west side of Main was Penny's and Frug's, Woolworths and Fields. And parades used to go right past the old Majestic Theater. There was a time that the Miss Oklahoma contestants would parade through downtown Tulsa on foot and in cars. One of the biggest parades ever in downtown was the 1967 Christmas Parade. It attracted an estimated 100,000 people, and it was described then as one of the year's most colorful and best attended events.
Parades down Main Street anymore. Back in the 70s, they closed off this section of Main and turned it into a pedestrian mall.
Coming up on Tulsa Memories, we reminisce about the Hotel Tulsa and other places not here anymore.
Mark on the Tulsa skyline in 1967 with the 4th National Tower. We revolutionized drive-up banking in Tulsa. And remember the piggy bank of Home Federal Savings, later to become Sooner Federal? We're all bank poor now, with a commitment to...
What used to be the city's Main Street, but time has changed the look of Tulsa.
Jack Frank takes us back now to the time when Tulsa was transforming itself from small town to metropolis.
Did you know in the 1930s, Tulsa had more skyscrapers than any city its size? And in the following years, the city continued to establish itself as a booming metropolis, a city built with oil money. And the construction craze continued right into the 60s. In 1965, a circular, futuristic apartment complex was rising on the south edge of downtown near the Arkansas River. The University Club Tower, it was called. Reporter Clayton Vaughn was there.
Eventually, it will go up many more stories, contain luxury apartments, an Olympic-sized swimming pool, and a club facility in the top floors.
In 1966, Tulsa was putting finishing touches on what was then the state's tallest building. The Fourth National Bank building was topped out at 32 stories. You could get a great view of the city from up on the roof at 6th and Boulder. 1 block south, City Service was breaking ground for its headquarters at 7th and Boulder. Downtown was becoming more vibrant.
And I think chambers of commerce have also recognized...
Clyde Cole became president of the Metropolitan Tulsa Chamber of Commerce in 1966, a position he still holds today. And he remembers those days when downtown was the heart of the city.
Of course, downtown was still a major retail center. We still had in the downtown area companies like Frug's, like Brown Duncan, like Vandiver's, Penny's, were all downtown, along with a number of smaller retail firms. So it was a major shopping center in that sense. There were a number of the doctors that had their offices downtown, rather than out in at the hospital area. This was before the St. Francis had built, of course, all of their doctors' buildings in St. John. And there was a medical arts building downtown that was about a 12 or 14-story building that was totally filled with physicians. That was just one building. So in many instances, your doctor was downtown rather than out near the hospital.
As downtown modernized, there were casualties. A lot of historic places were torn down. The Bliss Hotel was imploded as part of urban renewal to make room for the Williams Center Forum Complex. The Shriners Building was an Art Deco gem at 4th and Denver. They sure don't make them like that anymore, do they? KRMG Radio once had studios there, and the Cimarron Ballroom was also inside. The place is now a parking lot. And then there was the Hotel Tulsa. Parts of the Academy Award-winning movie Tulsa were shot in the hotel lobby in the late 40s. The stars were Robert Preston and Susan Hayward.
The Hotel Tulsa was the place where millions of dollars worth of oil deals were conducted in the lobby of the building.
Robert Powers is curator of the Tulsa Historical Society.
It was certainly a wonderful hotel that many people had very fond memories of. There was a cocktail lounge on the 4th Street entrance, which many people told me was one of the swingingest places in the city of Tulsa for years and years and years.
The Hotel Tulsa was replaced by the Performing Arts Center. It's hard to imagine life before the Broken Arrow Expressway, but it wasn't always here. The BA was opened one section at a time in the middle 60s, eventually providing a much-needed link between downtown and the southeast. This footage shows a historical moment in Tulsa's shopping history. Groundbreaking for South Roads Mall at 41st and Yale, Tulsa's first indoor air-conditioned shopping center. The city's newest and most modern homes were going up on the south side. The 1966 Parade of Homes featured houses starting at $16,000. For that, you got a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home with state-of-the-art appliances.
For every dollar that...
And evangelist Oral Roberts contributed to the growth of South Tulsa, opening his university at 81st and Lewis in September 1965 to 300 students. Billy Graham was at Oral's side for the dedication. Right after the school opened, Oral Roberts was looking for more money to expand.
We're asking the nation for $11 million. We're asking Oklahoma for $1 million. And we ask our friends in Tulsa for $3,343,000.
A little sports trivia. Who had the state's best football team in the mid-60s? It was the University of Tulsa. In 1964 and 65, the Golden Hurricane had the nation's most explosive offense. Skelly Stadium was an exciting place. A key player in TU's great offense was number 81, receiver Howard Twilley, Heisman Trophy runner-up in 65.
Yes, sir. I'm really looking forward to this game down North Texas State. I like 4 catches, breaking the career record, which will be good for the university and will be good for me. And
Howard Twilley now lives in Tulsa.
But 64 and 65 were the years where the University of Tulsa football team became identified with passing performance and passing excellence, and receiving as well. And that was an identity that propelled the University of Tulsa into the national limelight.
The TU quarterback wearing number 14 is Billy Guy Anderson. Twilley was his favorite target. Following his college days at TU, Twilley went on to star for the Miami Dolphins, but he has great memories of when the Hurricane was the talk of Tulsa.
The University of Tulsa's football team became a unifying force for the city of Tulsa. It was something that unified the people. We all were ready to talk about, well, you know, the University of Tulsa is going to the bowl this year, and they're the national passing champions, and is Jerry Rome going to win the Heisman Trophy, and all those kinds of things. That was just kind of what people talked about. And I think it was significant because it unified the city.
Howard's certainly right about that unifying feeling. Football fan or not, it was an exciting time here back in the 60s. And we can still remember that sense of community it created here.
Up next on Tulsa Memories, scenes from a racially divided Tulsa from the 19...
Were routinely denied access to stores, restaurants, and jobs.
Jack Frank brings us unforgettable scenes from the 1960s when long-standing barriers began to fall.
At the height of the civil rights movement, this was a common sight. Marches and protests were happening almost every day here. Blacks simply wanted the freedoms enjoyed by the rest of Tulsa.
There was no place in the city that was outside North Tulsa that a black could buy a cup of coffee. None. Blacks were not even allowed in the downtown department stores. You couldn't try on goods. I mean, when the city of Tulsa hired the first African-American elevator operator, it made the front pages of the black press. I mean, that's how rigid things were.
Don Ross is now an Oklahoma State representative. Back then, he was in the thick of the civil rights movement. He was in this crowd that rallied on March 13th, 1965 in downtown and at the federal court building.
And I call upon you not only to just send your telegrams today, send them to the President of the United States and tell him freedom is not in trouble in Vietnam. Freedom is in trouble here in the United States of America.
The civil rights movement, early press coverage made us out that we were a bunch of crooks and trespassers, that we were doing something not only wrong, unconstitutional. Well, certainly we were. The law was wrong.
The civil rights movement sharply divided Tulsa. Some whites marched in sympathy with the blacks. Others felt a little differently.
Yeah, I think tensions were very high here. Matter of fact, at one point, the entire city council met privately with so-called black leaders at the time because they anticipated a riot.
The Oklahoma Highway Patrol conducted riot training, but the civil rights movement here never did get out of hand.
Were blacks violent? No. Was society at the time violent? Yes.
Well, Tulsans have sure done some silly things over the years. Like in June 1957, in front of the county courthouse, a crowd gathered for the burial of a brand new Plymouth. The car was a time capsule, and it was put in the ground for Tulsa-Rama, an event celebrating 50 years of Oklahoma statehood. That Plymouth is still in the ground and is going to stay there until the year 2007. All sorts of Tulsa paraphernalia was placed in the Plymouth, plus cans of gasoline and oil were put in there. Hundreds of people watched.
People would all line up all around here.
Former Tulsa band leader Clarence Love was there when they buried the Plymouth. His contribution to the time capsule was a case of beer.
I had this case of Schlitz canned beer. I put
I gave it to him, and I wrote on the tires the name of my son. We autographed the tires on the car. Michael Love, I put on there, my son. Hope you get this when they dig it up.
Clarence Love will be 99 years old when that Plymouth is dug up in the year 2007.
But it's going to be a great afternoon. I won't be there. I'll be at the Memorial Park, I guess, thinking about it. But I got enough people I've advertised, told about, sent pictures to, and everything. So I'll have a lot of guests here. I bet you that.
Well, this is where the old Plymouth was buried, on the east side of the Tulsa County Courthouse. No telling the condition of this car when it's unearthed in the year 2007.
When the car was buried, Tulsans took guesses on what the city's population would be in the year 2007. Those guesses were put on microfilm, and the microfilm put down right with the car. Now, whoever comes closest wins that 1957 Plymouth. And if he or she is not around, then it goes to their family.
Hopefully, we'll be around when that car comes out of the ground.
We hope you've enjoyed seeing these old pictures as much as we've enjoyed bringing them to you.
Thanks for joining us.
Tulsa Memories has been a Bank 4 special presentation.